It's time for the Blazor Power Hour.
Welcome to the Blazor Power Hour.
Introducing the Blazor Power Hour.
No, seriously, it's time for Blazor Power Hour.
Hey friends, it's time for the Blazor Power Hour.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Blazor Power Hour.
You're checking out the Blazor Power Hour.
Welcome to the Blazor Power Hour.
It's Blazor Power Hour. Go Ed!
It's time for the Blazor Power Hour and the checkboxes.
Hello, Blazor fans. Welcome to another Blazor Power Hour. I've got a show here today talking about a data-bound checkbox list. And Windows decided it is going to hide all of my icons, so I can't open Visual Studio. So give me a second. Try to figure out why it just did this. I think it changed my primary monitor or something. Nope, this is my main display. Something it decided to just toggle at the last minute here. We'll do this the old-fashioned way. Just say Visual Studio. We don't need a taskbar. We'll just go through the installer and pick one of these. So I've got Visual Studio 2019 preview. Let's go ahead and launch that one because we can use the latest and greatest .NET bits with this, unless there's been a release in the last 24 hours I don't know about. That has happened on the show a few times as well, but we'll build something from scratch today. This is the Blazor Power Hour. That's what we do. We try to build something in an hour's time, roughly, and learn something new about Blazor. So let's give this a shot. So this week we're going to tackle a fancy checkbox list. So we're going to build a data-bound checkbox list using .NET Preview 6 and Blazor WebAssembly. Doesn't matter that it's WebAssembly. I just thought I'd throw that in there. It could be Blazor Server. It would work in both instances because we're working on components. Oh, look, there's a Visual Studio preview update that I should not click on live on the show because we know that ends in a burning ball of flames. So let's see if our Hello World project is working in .NET 6. If it doesn't work, we'll just go back to .NET 5 and make sure that, a process ID is not running. So that is not an error that I'm going to deal with today, so we might go back to .NET 5 here. It looks like I'm probably going to need that Visual Studio preview update for this to work. So we'll go back to .NET 5, where we know things are still stable. Smab UK, welcome to the show. I'm sure you remember seeing me fail at .NET 6 at least once already. Let's not go down that path again today. I'll save that for my Friday show. We do a little bit more off-the-cuff stuff on the Friday show. All right, let's try this again. Fancy checkbox list. So we're going to make a data-bound checkbox list, and then we're going to try to style it so it looks a little bit... Oh, it already created that. What do you know? So when I typed that into Visual Studio earlier, it actually made the project. I'll just throw an S on there and make it plural. Do I plan to make videos about Blazor and IS4? I'm not sure what IS4 is, so I'd probably take that as a no unless you can explain what IS4 is, and maybe if it's something I'm into, that's a possibility. Identity Server 4. Oh, I might not make a show about that personally, but we could have somebody on that's familiar with Identity Server and get them to talk about it. So that's an excellent suggestion, Silly Queen. Glad to have this suggestion. Let's see what we can do with that. We're going to be doing an ASP.NET week. I don't know if I can get anybody that quickly for Identity Server 4, but we are doing one in a few weeks. We'll be announcing it soon. And we're going to have guests from all over the community. We've got Jimmy Bogard. He's a fantastic speaker. He's going to talk about some ASP.NET stuff. We've got Khalid from JetBrains. He's going to come on and talk about micro APIs. And I think we're going to have somebody from Microsoft on to talk about gRPC. So Identity Server 4 is something we need to add to our list for things to talk about this year. So let's take a look. Let's eat our fetch data page. Let's use our fetch data page as our starting point, because on fetch data we have a list, or we have data. So we have some data here. We'll just use this as our data source. And what I want is a generic component that I can throw any type of data in and provide checkboxes and check those items. So what's going to be semi-unique about this is that the checkbox list, we're not going to have to add the checked state to our model. I'm going to show you a trick that you can use to data bind a list and have multiple selected items for that list. So let's go over to, it doesn't really matter where I put this. I'm going to make a component. I'm going to add a new Razor component. And this is going to be our select list component. We'll call it select list. So we're going to need some things in our select list. This is going to need a generic item template. So we'll use the type param directive here. And what this is going to do, it's going to make a generic templated item component. So we'll be able to supply a template to this component and allow developers to customize the items in the template. And then T-item is going to allow us to bind any type to this list of, or any type to this component. So when you see the component select list I just created, we'll go ahead and type that here. Select list. This is actually a select list of T, or T item. So it's generic, just like you'd see like a list or an IEnumerable of T. So we're going to have a select list, and we're going to be data binding to the select list. We'll throw our weather forecast data in there because we already have some data to work with. If we're going to be working with lists of data, we're going to need some containers to hold lists, right? So what we need to do is create some parameters first. So I've got a parameter. All parameters have to be public. And this one is going to be a list of T item, that generic item template, or that generic item type. We'll just call this one items. We'll throw a getter and a setter on it. So we've got our list of items, and we need, let's see, what else do we need for this? We're going to have to iterate over this list of items. We'll throw a for each on here. And we'll say for each item in items. And now we need the generic template that will supply for the developer that's going to consume this to let them work with the items that are being rendered out here. Thank you for the comments. Definitely it will be up on our YouTube channel. Feel free to watch it at any time. The nice thing about the live shows, you can ask questions, so stop back sometime, catch the show live. And we are going to create a render fragment here. And render fragments in Blazor are what allow us to kind of pass around child content from a page to a component, for example. And this needs, I need to name this, by the way. We'll call this item template, and we'll throw a get and a set on that one. And now we have a render fragment of T item. And to render this render fragment out, we'll just go up into the markup and say item template and pass in the item that we're iterating on. So now we have the basic, hello, Mr. Magoo, welcome. We have the basic setup for a generic data-bound component. This is about as bare bones as we can go. But now we can go back over to fetch data, and you can see I have a select list. I need to bind this to some data. I chose a list for this. We could choose other types. An IEnumerable, for example, would work fine here. Let's actually try this. We'll do an IEnumerable of T. It's a little bit more flexible. So we'll come back here and say items are the forecasts. And then each time we iterate over a forecast, we can apply an item template. And in this, we'll have this weird context. It's kind of a name that is set by default because generics don't know what type of data is going to be bound to them. So we just use the word context. But what we can actually do is change that. I'll show that in a moment. First, we'll go ahead and run this. And you'll see that we've got some weird output here. That's because I'm not specifying what the data is that I'm writing out here, other than I've bound an object to it called weather forecast. So it's writing out the full namespace for the weather forecast. So we have to come in and say context. Why is it not giving me IntelliSense here? I should have IntelliSense for this, and we should be able to say weather summary. Summary should be valid here. And let's see if the compiler is going to catch anything. There we go. Let's try closing this weather forecast page, fetch data, and come back. Maybe IntelliSense will light up for us here. Let's try this again. Dot summary. I don't know why it's not giving me any at all. Let's try closing all of these out. It's working fine. It is working absolutely fine. The thing is, I just want to show where the IDE is supposed to hook in properly. And it's still not seeing that this is a weather forecast item. Okay, that is fine. It is working and it's running in the browser. So now that I've specified that the data is binding to that list and I want to show the summary portion of the item, you can see I've got the summary written out here. You can see freezing, balmy, chilly, etc. And that's what the item template lets us do. It lets us customize what's being written out here. And let's change this context so it's a little bit more familiar to what we're working with. So we'll call this a forecast instead. So just by adding this context parameter here, it's a built-in parameter for all components, and we can set the name of that context. So now I have context of forecast, so I can just write forecast summary. I could bind other forecast things in here. If IntelliSense would help me, it'd be nice. Might try closing Visual Studio and just reopening Visual Studio because it's misbehaving. It's going to cause us other problems if it keeps this up. See if this will let our IntelliSense work for us. Visual Studio is going to be Visual Studio some days. You just got to kind of roll with it and give it a little reboot here. But we should be able to get a proper IntelliSense with this. Let's try it one more time. Now that it's caught up, forecast dot, and it's not going to do it for us today, folks. Sorry about that. That's an interesting one. That does work. It does have, the compiler does have insight as to how to light these things up. Let's go back to our component though, and our select list, and let's add some more functionality to it. Right now it's just looping over items and kind of dropping those out into the view here. I want to work with this as a checkbox. So one thing that we want to have is an actual checkbox in this. So let's do a label here, and we will write out the actually let's let the user define the label, and we'll put the checkbox in. So we want to be able to select the items that are in this checkbox list. So we'll write, I don't want input checkbox, I want an HTML input that is of type checkbox. And we will do some fancy work to set whether it is checked or not. And then, yeah, let's go ahead and put the label here for, let's make the content inside the label of the checkbox, or the content of the render fragment inside the label. So we'll render everything in the label and I'll put a checkbox, and then we'll have to do some work here to data bind this stuff to the checkbox and create an event and everything. It'll be really nice when we get done. So now you can see I've got my items and they're checkable. We can't really do anything with that check. We can't inspect the state of this or any of those type of things. Our application isn't really aware of that checkbox. It's not data bound to anything. So it's just kind of a dummy checkbox. And we also need to spell label correctly. That always helps. So label should be spelled right. We're also going to want to give this an ID so the checkbox correlates. We'll do that in a little bit here as well. I'm trying to think what a good way to do that would be. We might throw an indexer on this just so the label and the input are always correlating to one another, because we don't really have access to the label in the input's ID, because what we want to do here is do a label label 4, and then the ID of the checkbox should match the label 4 element or attribute here. So we want to have something like this, and if I put a static 1 in there, that is not going to work. I think there's a Razor bug with the ability to have a an indexer with for each and have it properly work. So what we could do here is just do a var index. Actually, this would need to go above. Let me think where I want to put that. We'll hold off on that for just a minute. Maybe we can find another unique identifier to put in here and see how this works. Let's try, for example, yeah, we'll leave that alone for a minute. Let's work on getting this data bound first, and then we'll tie those together, because what that's going to do is let us select the label to check the box, and that's not really important at this moment. So we'll circle back on that one in a minute. The checkbox doesn't do anything, so we're going to want to bind to the onChange event. So the onChange event is going to happen when we change the state of that checkbox. And then we want to take the item and bind back somehow data that we can use on our fetch data page. So when I click on these items, let's run this one more time before we get into that, so we can kind of explain what we want to do. When I click on one of these, I want this selected item, the whole item, not just the word freezing, to be data bound so I can do something with it. I can send it off to a process, or just show on the bottom here that it's been selected, just to kind of sanity check what we're doing. So let's throw a break in here, and then we'll throw actually let's do a horizontal rule. That'll give us a little space, and then we'll put a H2 tag here that just says selected items, and then we'll for each over the selected items somehow and write those out. I can't do comments here. Not like that, I can't. So we'll throw HTML comment in here and just say a list of selected items here. So we're going to write out a list of selected items below. As we check on check those off, they should be rendering out in the list below. So how can we do that? Let's go back over to our list component. We need to do some data binding here. And what I'd like is a syntax that I can just say @bind dash something, and it's going to bind me a list of all the items that are selected. And we did a, what is it called? A to-do list last week. And this would have been super handy to have for our to-do list. We could have just used this checkbox list to power that to-do list instead of writing all the code that we did. So let's go ahead and set ourselves up for that. So we need another parameter here. And this is going to be a public list of T item. Remember, we're using generics here. We want to stay generic with everything that we do. So we're going to have a generic list of T items. We can bind weather forecasts in here and list those out. Now, this is going to be our selected items. We'll have a getter setter on there because it's going to be a bindable property. And a really special feature of Blazor with data binding. If we want that bind syntax, we have to have an event that matches the name of property and an event with the suffix of changed on it. So let's make that. So we need a parameter, public, and this is going to be an event callback. The type here is really important. So the type also has to match the data bound type that we're using here. So we're going to send back a list of T item because internally Blazor is going to use this to set this list of selected items when it's doing the change event. There's some things it's going to wire up internally. Let's just say that. So we need to send back that generic list of items there as well. And then it needs a getter setter because it is a property, and IntelliSense is going crazy on me here. Let's, it won't let me type it, so I'll just copy and paste it. And it's not letting me type it because I didn't name it. We need selected items changed. And the naming of this is very important. The selected items should match this up to the word changed and then be suffixed with the word changed, or it will not work properly. So it's going to do a little bit of black magic behind the scenes to make this work for us. So we're using the framework's internal mechanics here by naming these things properly and setting the return value here properly. This will help us avoid errors in the long run. And finally, we have to trigger this event somehow. So what I want to do up here is say on change. We're going to tie into the DOM's on change event for a checkbox item. And we need to then raise the selected items changed event. So I can do this through a method. I could do it in line here as well. Let's just go ahead for clarity's sake and put it in a method. We'll say handle change, and handle change is going to take a T item of item. And then here's the interesting part, where any kind of custom or internal work that has to be done when we handle this change event goes in that method. So we're going to handle the change, and we're going to get an underscore here because there are some parameters that need to be satisfied with this. So anything that comes in from the onChange event, there are some change event arguments that I'm just going to throw away. So we'll put an underscore there and just lambda expression this over and call handle change. And I want to pass in item. That's my T item that is being bound with this for each loop. So we're going to call handle change, sending the item in. We're going to catch that item here. And then what we want to do is add it to the selected items list. So we've got selected items. We'll call add. We'll throw the item in it. And then we'll call selected items changed. And on that, it is safe to just call invoke async and also pass in the selected items list, because we have to return that to the event callback for it to work properly. So now when somebody clicks on the checkbox, it's going to trigger a change event. It'll throw away any event arguments we have coming in from that change event. And instead, we're just going to call handle change and pass in the item that was bound to that checkbox. The if change handler will pick it up, add it to the changed items list, and then trigger the event callback, passing back that new list. Pretty cool. Now, over here, we're binding to a list of forecast items. This is the raw collection that doesn't have the state of the selected items in it. So we're going to need another list of weather forecast items. This one actually has to be a list type. So we'll say list weather forecast. And this is going to be selected item, or we can just call it selected here. Selected forecasts. How about that? Selected forecasts are going to go here. We'll make this a getter and a setter, and we'll set this by default so we don't throw a null reference exception to a new list of weather forecast item. And if this is C# 9 or 10, 9 or above, we can use the new keyword and not have to retype the entire list of weather forecasts here. So we'll go and safely new up an empty list of weather forecasts. So when our selected items are selected, they have somewhere to go and it won't throw an error. Our source generators supported in Razor files. It would be nice to use source generators to generate this event property. I don't know if Razor files are supported in this version of source generators. I know there was support added in .NET 5 that was kind of loose for source generators in general. I wrote one for a utility for Blazor size, and it only works in .NET 6, but it doesn't generate Razor files. I think there's a chicken and egg scenario with it because some of the code, well, all of the Razor code that you write is generated into a class. And I think there's no mechanism to control when your source generator runs yet. I could be wrong. They might have updated this. It's moving pretty quick. At the time I was using it, you couldn't write a source generator that would work with a Razor file because it would the generated Razor code wouldn't be there yet for the Razor compiler to pick up and run it. So it happened after, and it would throw weird errors. Some of that was fixed in .NET 6. I don't know how far along it's come, though. So it'd be something interesting to check in on. I know my tool works in .NET 6. It does not work in .NET 5, but it doesn't do anything really complex with Razor. It just using the generated code it makes in Razor was failing in .NET 5, not in .NET 6. All right, so we've got our items are going to be the raw data, and then we need our selected items. So we'll call selected items, and we'll set that equal to selected forecasts. So now we have a second list, but this second list is not the raw data. This is our selected items. So we can say for each down here, now that we have something to put in this list, say, whoa, each item in selected forecasts. And this is a normal for each loop. We don't have T item and all that stuff here, so we're not going to deal with that context messiness. Let's go ahead and put this in an unordered list. And we'll throw our for each loop inside of it. And we will iterate over it with the list item and just say item dot, sorry, we need an at item dot. We'll throw the summary down here. Actually, let's throw everything in there because I want to show that we're getting more than, we're getting the entire item back which is really cool. We're not just binding to the word that you see on the checkbox. We're getting the entire item. So let's go ahead and just throw temperature and Celsius in there too. We'll throw a little colon in there as a separator. And then we don't need this comment anymore. And we should be able to see something in action here, unless there's a build error or anything. There's not, thank goodness. Go over to fetch data, and we have freezing, bracing, balmy, chilly. If I select chilly, something's not right yet. So we didn't get an update to our UI yet. So something isn't quite hooked in. And the thing that I left out is actually pretty obvious to me now that I've done it. We're not using data binding here. We've given it the list. We didn't tell it to bind that list. So we need to say bind dash selected items. So this is telling Blazor that we want a data bind, two-way data bind between those, the lists inside of the selected items and the fetch data page. So now we should be able to come back, and there's chilly, balmy, freezing, bracing, etc. And then we can come back, and I'm only adding items. So we've got a little logical error here. I'm only adding things when they're selected. I'm not removing them. So we need to update our logic just a little bit here. And where we're only adding something, what we need to do is first check and see if it's in the list. And if it is, we'll remove it. So let's give this a try. And we'll say if selected items dot contains item, then we will call remove on that. We'll remove that item, else we will go ahead and put that item in that selected item list. Let's see if this does the trick. Try to run that again. And we'll check balmy and freezing, and then uncheck, and then recheck, and there we go. Now we have a better list, one that works properly and doesn't repeatedly add things indefinitely to the list. There we go. Pretty cool. So now we've got a data bound list of selected items. And let's see what we can do with the ID selection part of this. We'll either throw an indexer in here, or let's see if we can find something that just works. Let's try, I haven't tried this yet. See if it can pull enough information off of item to make this unique. Not sure if it will. To look at the DOM actually and see what it's rendering inside there. That worked. That did not. So anything we select in there, it's giving it all the same ID apparently. So we do need to put some sort of unique identifier on this. Let's see if we can come up with something. So for each item in items, let's see how we can do this. Let's just throw in var ID equals new, or let's try GUID. Just throw a GUID on this one and say new GUID. Is that a property or a method? Hash code for each object. That would probably work too. We can just create an ID out of the ether though, and just throw them on there. We don't need to really store these anywhere or anything like that. All we need to make sure is that it is unique, and then both these values are the same. And then that should be good enough. That should make this happy enough just to tie those two boxes together so we can click on the name and have it apply to the checkbox. So we're just leveraging some HTML here. Anytime the ID of a checkbox is the same as the label 4, you can see these two ID, the 4 and the ID match. That is all we really care about. And when that happens, we're going to select the item that it corresponds to. So that gives us our selection. This is kind of ugly, but it is templated, so we can do whatever we want with it. We can throw this in a list as well. And then these can be list items. So that's what's nice about our item template here, is not only can we display any value from our data in here and still data bind to the entire item when we select it, but we can also style it a little bit, give it a wrapper, and you can see that is not the prettiest thing though. So what is going on with that list item that it displays? Is label not... Oh, I see what we're doing here. It's the way I'm writing this out. Everything is going inside of the label. So, I'm wondering how I can fix that properly. So when we iterate, everything goes in the label, so we can't use the list like I thought I could. Yeah. So this only pertains to the label element. So the label, the LI, is ending up inside of this label tag. So that's not what we want to do. Let me think on that one. So we'll pull this out temporarily. We can always style what's in there and make that. Let's do that first, because that was part of what I wanted to do here, is actually style the elements that are in this. And welcome to the show. I'm glad to have some new viewers. So what we want to do is we'll put a style on, we'll put this in, let's go ahead and wrap this in a div. And if we do that, this is going to go nuts on us. We'll throw that var up there. And then we can put a class on this. Okay, Bootstrap has a custom checkbox namespace. I don't want to interfere with that. We'll call this, we'll just -b select list, and we'll use CSS isolation to even further make sure that we don't conflict with that any Bootstrap namespaces or anything. So in Pages, we're going to go ahead and add a new file. So we'll do new item, and this is going to be a CSS class. It's going to be specific to our list. So we'll say style sheet, and this is going to be, and we have to name this just right, select list.razor.css. And that will give us isolated CSS just for this component. Now, what's really cool about checkboxes in HTML is that we can style them. Let's see, I think I lost my bookmark for this. Give me 1 second here. I've got a good bookmark. Let's see if I can grab it. I had a really nice code pen to show you all. Let's see if this is it. This is not it. All right, I know how I found it, so we'll just do what I did to find it. So let's do checkbox CSS. We'll do a little Google search again. And you can see there's lots of ways to style checkboxes. There was one that I thought was really cool in here that I wanted to give a try. Similar to that one right here. So this actually links to a YouTube video to see how to do all of this. We're going to borrow the code from CodePen. So here's the CodePen here, and I'll link this into chat so you can take a look as well. But what you can see with this, there's the CodePen for everybody watching. It should go out to all channels if you want to take a look at that. You can style checkboxes pretty uniquely. So they even put custom colors around these, but you can see they're not your run-of-the-mill checkboxes. So they're applying a lot of custom CSS here to make this work. So some of the magic here is there is a checkbox checked selector here. And this is kind of a nice feature of the checkbox is it has the state already with it. So you could do this without the checkbox, actually. You can wire up your own event to any div element, for example. But then you have to throw other things on there, like the ARIA attributes and all of those things to make sure that you're accessible and all of that. When you have the checkbox, you already have all that metadata with it. So what we have to do is we have to clear out the built-in styles and then just override the styles with what we have here. Let's go ahead and borrow some of this, and we will put this in our CSS file. Now, we probably won't need all this because there's a lot of stuff to do with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff to change the color of the tick mark, as they call it in this. But we can use this as a starting point. I'm going to get rid of this, this margin 0, padding 0, box sizing, border box. That I don't think we need, and we can drop the font off of here. The body background we don't need as well. The wrapper, this is a set width. We'll roll with the set width for now and see how this turns out, but I would probably do this without a set width. Make it a little bit more responsive, but we can always tweak this as we go along. If we look at their HTML, we probably want to get a little bit of the content here as well. So we need a label with that class and everything on it. So let's go into our T item here, and we'll just paste this as a little bit of example. So we want label with a class of option item. That's what they called it. So I gave it a name, but we're going to just go ahead with what we have. So we'll go ahead and replace that. We have our label. Our input is of type checkbox. This also, they gave a class of checkbox. So we'll go ahead and roll with that as well. So the input is type checkbox, class checkbox. The label wraps the checkbox item. That I think is something that, that may be where my biggest mistake was. So let's go ahead and take their example. This actually should be the label on the outer bit here. We'll bring our 4 up into that. And then we'll just leave T item here. It still leaves our template inside of interesting. Okay. Then they have a div inner, and this one was the Facebook one. We're not going to use the Facebook part of this. So we'll take the word Facebook out. So they have the option item, the inner part of the option. They have a tick mark class, an icon, and a name. So we'll go ahead and close that off. Their checkbox is up at the top. So I'm just trying to make it look like what they used in their really nice looking example. So we've got the outermost element is the label. We have the input at the top. We have a div. And then I took off the Facebook part of it because we're not going to have that in our application. And then I'm not sure we're probably not going to use that item either. We'll keep the tick mark there and then take off. We'll make the name. We'll use the name where the item template is. How about that? So let's see how this turns out. So we're in some uncharted water here. I haven't tried this before. Let's see what our fancy checkboxes look like. Okay, we're getting somewhere. So it looks like I'm missing something that removes the actual checkbox that the DOM has, but you see we got this nice little icon that pops up, and they are nice squares, so we can do some customization now. So we've got, I like where the label is in the center of the item. That's pretty nice. They all flex with the flex box, so they're listing out, and they'll keep going and wrapping. And then we could always change flex direction and everything with this if we wanted to. So we can make that responsive pretty easy, I think. All of the CSS is isolated nicely here. And I'm wondering if I don't see where we're clearing out the checkbox that comes with the DOM. So let's go back to their example, the CodePen example, which I think I accidentally closed. I put it in chat, but once it's there, I don't have any way to access it. So that was kind of a mistake on my part. I need to go find that link one more time. There are built-in CSS to remove the checkbox itself. So you can see in their example, there's no little checkbox. So how are we hiding that checkbox is what I would like to know. So we've got some absolute positioning in here. There should be a pseudo selector though that eliminates the checkbox from view. I don't see it in the CSS. This is interesting. I don't know where they're hiding it. I'm wondering if it's in. So we've got tick mark before. That looks like it may be taking it off there. I don't know why I'm missing it in mine. So we need to look at. There's tick mark before. Content none, absolute position. They're putting it in a corner. There should be something to hide the DOM's checkbox though, and we're not getting that for some reason. So let's see if we can figure this one out. So this is the checkbox I'm talking about. We actually want to hide that because we're creating our own check experience here. So our check user interface, if you want to call it that. So if type is checkbox, and this may be, let's see, reboot is overlaying something here. Input type checkbox. I think this is, it's all built in. We need to override that. So if we actually do another Google search, I know where to find this. If we do CSS checkbox again, W3 Schools has some information on this as well. So what we want is this here, to hide the browser's default checkbox. And I don't know why theirs works in CodePen, but not here. I'm sure I could figure it out, but we don't have too much longer on the show here. We got about 5 minutes to see if we can do this and make it work the way we want it to. We could always go back and refactor things after, but the idea here is see if we can do this in an hour. So far, we've built a data-bound checklist. What we want to do is take this. We have the term wrapper here. So we'll use wrapper input and see if that, quote, hides the browser's default checkbox. So we'll use that. We need to recompile because this is an inline, or not an inline style, but no, it did not work. Let's see. Something's overwriting this. Let's try putting this at the bottom of our CSS. We'll save that again. Let's rebuild. And it's still showing here. So let's see what exactly. It may be Bootstrap that is doing it. Let's see, reboot is not it. Box sizing border box was built in. We didn't need to deal with that. That's why I removed it from the other CSS code. There's a lot of bootstrappy things going on in there, but I don't see that our CSS code is even being applied there. It's being applied here. I can see that it's hitting the label, but it's not letting me take away. There's something with a higher specificity selector, even though that's really weird because we are using CSS isolation, and usually that takes care of these type of things. But I think it's this one here possibly. So we'll do input type checkbox and see if that does the trick for us. Let's do a rebuild. Still not getting a checkbox to go away. I know you can erase these things. I know they can be hidden. We've got several examples that show that can be hidden, but there's something in our project. There's something lurking in here that's making that checkbox show up. So we need to troubleshoot just a little bit more. Let's try something really fast here. I'm going to create a new style, and it really threw a lot of stuff on there. What are some of the styles that are in here? We want position absolute, width and height 0. Those are the main ones, I think. So opacity 0, that's what in container, checkbox, item. Okay. So opacity 0 is either getting overridden or it's not. Let's see if I can find that line. Thank you, Silly Queen, for pointing this one out. So container, option item, checkbox. Container, option item, checkbox. Opacity 0. So that should be applied though. And I don't see it getting applied is the weird part. If I look through here, I don't see our CSS getting applied to the actual checkbox item. Let's try. I don't know if it has something to do with the ID possibly, or something else in my CSS is doing this, but let's try opacity 0. And there it goes. It goes away. So if we're very specific with it, we can remove it. I don't know if it's missing a brace, but we can give that a look. I think it's doing the indentation because when you have something like wrapper and then wrapper title, it tries to help you. And these are all under container, and they get moved out that way. Am I missing a CSS class in here somewhere? Because I did modify this slightly because there's things like Facebook and other crap in here that I don't need. So I took them out. And they have their own, quote, tick mark. So we don't need that either. Let me try temporarily removing this ID. Oh, it's on container. Oh, thank you. There we go. So yeah, container. I don't have container because container needs to go around the select list. So we need to put this up here. Thank you. Silly Queen got it. And Smab. So class is container. We need the wrapper, the outermost container for this. And then we should be able to see it go away. And that one is stale. I'm going to go ahead and just close all of these out. I think we have it now. I think Silly Queen's on the right path. There we go. There we go. Now they have some other things in here like Facebook and Twitter and whatever that gives it a special color. We're just binding it to some generic data. So we're not going to have all of those things, but we could add some of that. Let's do let's just put the word theme on here for a minute, and then I'll go back through all of these. We don't need all of these. And is there any more? Yeah, there's one for all of them. We'll just create a single one here. We'll call that one theme. And then this was mine. I didn't need that. We could go back and simplify a lot of this. It was a really great example that was provided, but as most examples go, there's a little bit more here than we need. So now we should be able to come over to select razor, and then on inner we can say theme, and that will theme that check mark thing, I think. I think we've got that. I could use Breezy and all of that stuff, Smab, but it being a generic data-bound list, we don't know exactly what is going to be in here. This could be integers for all we know. It could be a list of T that we're binding here. So we're not always going to have those specific things. But now we've got, look at that. That actually looks really good. We could also use the bootstrap styles or anything else we wanted to make this look nice. What what I'd like to have is a not selected state as well. So you know that these are select boxes. The only thing we have right now is just the finger that's highlighting them. But I would draw like a line around these, a dotted line or something that lets you know. Dotted line might imply drag and drop, so maybe not that. But something that just implies that they're checked or not checked. But you get the idea. We did it. We can tinker with this more if we want to on another show. But actually, I'll be doing that because we're going to go over this on my Friday show that is on my channel at twitch.tv/Ed Charbonneau. We're going to be building a seat selection utility for my Blazport application that's going to use this. But what's really nice here is you can see the selected items showing up down here at the bottom. So we're selecting many. And what's really cool is when we pass our data in, we don't have to worry about our data having a selected value to it. So when weather forecast comes in, weather forecast doesn't have a selected property. There's no selected property to it. So this this approach here, we're giving back an entire list that we can then use for other parts of the application state. You know, maybe there's a submit button at the end and the selected values go back to the server to be saved somewhere. Our model, our weather forecast, isn't aware of any of this. And the component isn't aware of the data that's being supplied to it. But together, they allow selected items. And you'll see stuff like this in Telerik UI for Blazor, for example. So if we go to components and look at something, here I want to demos.telerik.com. There's data-bound components like the data grid that utilize this type of behavior. And if we look at selected items, there's so many features here, it's hard to remember exactly where I found it. Selection, there we go. We have a checkbox column here, and I can select items from it. If you view the source to it, it's going to look pretty familiar. We have bind selected items, and you just bind to another list that you want to contain your selected items, and there's your items from your data grid that you selected. Same idea that we're using here. Smab, this is not for the Mars helicopter trip, but that is on the agenda. That is one of the quote upsell items. There's actually an upsell, an add-on step in the wizard for getting a helicopter trip on Mars. And that came from you. That is in the agenda to put on the application. But the data binding in Blazor is just amazing and dead simple that we can do this. And we just created a really interactive piece that looks nice. I'm going to go back and tweak this a little bit more. I'll share the code here as well up on GitHub shortly. So I'll put that up on my personal GitHub. So I'll share that link as well if you haven't found that before. I'll post that on GitHub within the next hour here. I'm just going to tweak it ever so slightly. I might just put the component files, not the whole project. Whatever is easiest, I'm going to just throw it up there. So cool stuff. Thank you all for joining me for that. We're just 10 minutes over. We did a lot in an hour. We really did. And special thanks to Silly Queen for solving that container issue with the CSS. I was missing some context there. You were able to sniff that out, so thank you. And we'll do this again next week. Tomorrow, Tomorrow I'll be on doing some VR with Alyssa. That's always a blast. Friday I'll be on my channel. And then let's see, what else do we have coming up here on Code It Live? We've got TJ with his React show this afternoon. And let's take a look. I'm going to take a look at our own schedule because my wonderful coworkers add stuff to our channel all the time. All of the time. And it is hard to keep up with all of the content. Good problem to have. So React Wednesday, that might have got bumped up to 12:45. So that's going to be here not too far from now. TJ will be back with React. Then we're doing our VR show. Next week, we've got a special user group. So the Eat, Sleep, Code podcast is going to get bumped. And then it's going to be mid-August. That's about all I can give you. August 18th, we're going to have a special show. The tentative agenda is to do .NET or ASP.NET Core. So you won't see Blazor. Instead, you're going to see some MVC or Razor pages. We're going to have Jimmy Bogard on. We're going to have somebody from Microsoft talking gRPC, which is super interesting. We might do some SignalR and that type of stuff. So we're going to have a ASP.NET day just to kind of talk about some of the things that are in ASP.NET these days. All right. Let's see if we can do a raid. Just remember to come back in about an hour and a half and catch TJ. Let's see if we can find somebody. I think Jeff Fritz might still be on. Jeff Fritz is, let's see here. We're going to do a raid. Is he not online? C# Fritz. Okay, he is not online, it looks like. Let's see if we can find someone else to raid. It's always nice to hand people off if we can. I don't have... This is a rare event. There are no streamers for this time of day. This is usually a pretty busy time of day for streaming. We have Lana. Lana Lux is online. She's doing some 3D modeling, making some heads and faces. This should be interesting. We'll go see what Lana Lux is up to. So say hi to Lana Lux for me. And she's a .NET dev that does gaming with Unity. She's drawing some crazy looking stuff in Unity or in Blender or 3D Max or something right now. Did this not, the raid is not working. It's going to do this again. Something went wrong. Oh, there it goes. Raid now. Bye-bye. Thank you. See you guys later. Bye all. If you're watching from YouTube, you probably don't know what just happened. On Twitch, we can send our viewers somewhere else. They just went off to Lana Lux's channel. Same with the Facebook folks. You don't know what a raid is probably, but take care. We'll see you soon.